Hey everyone, James Lynch here doing a quick video explaining why I think Jake Paul is going to defeat Tyron Woodley on August 28th. Before I dig into that, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It's an easy way to support this channel. If you guys have seen some of the videos I've been posting on this channel, I was able to, react to the news of the fight being booked. I made my pick for Jake Paul and I got a lot of heat. I got a lot of people coming after me for my pick. So I figured I'd make this video to kind of explain why I think Jake Paul is going to win this. And we're going to dig into the matchup specifically. And let me just get off the screen here and we will get to the fight itself. There we go. Social media influencer Jake Paul to box former UFC welterweight champ Tyron Woodley. And like I mentioned in another video this week, this is going to be the first boxing fight for Tyron Woodley. It'll be the fourth for Jake Paul. It's going to be a 20-by-20 ring with 10-ounce gloves. And this event will be distributed by Showtime, which is a key thing. I'll mention that in a second, and will air on pay-per-view. Fans will be in attendance, yada, yada, yada. So here's why I think Jake Paul is going to win this fight. Let me start first with the fact that Jake Paul is a lot younger than Tyron Woodley. I think most people know that, but still 24 years old compared to 39 is a big difference here. Right? Tyron Woodley, 39 years old. So that right there is something to kind of keep in mind. Younger guy, probably not even in the prime of his career right now, Jake Paul. I think he's a guy that is getting better every fight, and we saw that on display in the last fight with Ben Askren. Now, look, I fully admit I picked Ben Askren in that last fight to beat Jake Paul, but I was dead wrong on that. Jake Paul getting the first round finish in that fight, so Jake Paul going to have the youth advantage as well. And like I mentioned in another video as well, Jake Paul's going to be the taller fighter. I know some people question that the height and reach and all that. We got the height and reach listed on Wikipedia here, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. On BoxRec, I don't think they have his height and reach listed, but again, he is going to be bigger than Woodley. This is a guy that, again, this is going to be a 190-pound catch weight. I think that favors Paul more. Woodley fought at welterweight in his UFC career. He has not fought at middleweight or 205 pounds, anything like that. Woodley is 5'9" with a 74-inch reach. So like I said, Jake Paul going to have the height and reach advantage in this matchup. The other thing with Jake Paul as well is that you got to remember, this guy's loaded. You look at his bank account there, net worth $11.5 million. That's key because, again, Jake Paul is a guy that has only been boxing the last 3 years. That's all he's been doing 24/7. Woodley has not been doing that. Yes, he's been training for his upcoming fights, but he's not been going through and, getting the best coaches, boxing coaches in the world. I know he's been doing some boxing training, but that's not the same thing as what Jake Paul's been doing. So in terms of who's had more boxing experience over the last 3 years, it's Jake Paul. We got to start with that as well. I think there's also a kind of a false narrative here as well with Woodley in that, Woodley is a legit striker, and that's not the false part. The false part is people thinking that Woodley is the same Woodley that defeated Robbie Lawler, the same Woodley that defeated Paul Daly and had all these other wins. But those wins were ages ago. That Robbie Lawler knockout was back in July of 2016. That Woodley we've not seen. In fact, that was the last knockout win that Tyron Woodley had, was back against Robbie Lawler in the first round. If they rematch now, I don't know if he knocks out Robbie Lawler. And yes, he dropped Stephen Thompson. I think the fight after that wasn't able to finish Thompson. But think about it. Over the last, since 2016, he hasn't had a single knockout win since then. Submission win over Darren Till. And you look at his last 4 fights, that's another sort of red flag here. And I know these are the best in the UFC's welterweight division, right? You've got Kamaru Usman, you got Gilbert Burns, you got Colby Covington, you got Vicente Luque. But the thing is, those fights weren't competitive at all. Usman absolutely destroyed Woodley in that fight. It was, just a 3-round, out-wrestled him, outpaced him. Woodley had no answers for that. Gilbert Burns, basically, I think what happened in that fight was, in the Gilbert Burns fight was, Woodley had a game plan, but that went out the window when Burns hit him right away. If you remember, he hit him early on. Woodley was kind of stunned, and Burns just went after him and ended up winning a decision. But that was a fight I think, could have been close to being stopped with Burns putting on a lot of output there as well. The Colby fight, Colby not known as much of a finisher or a puncher or whatever. I realized it was a rib injury, but still, Covington wore on him. It ended up being an injury there. And that was just last year, right? So Woodley had a rib injury in that fight. You think of all the wear and tear he's had over the last couple of fights. I mean, again, he's not getting completely outboxed in those fights. You don't see his face, looking like, you're like on level, 30% in the, old video game Doom or anything like that. But you can see that he's still getting beat pretty decisively in these fights. And the Luque fight, I know it was only 1 round, but it was a fight where, again, he got dropped in the fight. Actually, I'm not able to use footage here, unfortunately, but I did want to bring up the play-by-play for the Woodley and Luque fight since that was the last fight he had. Woodley rushes out, fires a big right hand, moves immediately to the clinch. I'll just move along a little bit here. Big right hand again from Woodley. Luque counters left, and Woodley is hurt. Luque lands another. Woodley stumbles and grabs the cage to stand up. That, if you watch that fight with him and Luque, and again, I wish we had the footage. I just don't want to get kicked off YouTube here. That's a fight where you could see that Woodley was in trouble. I mean, the fact that Luque got the submission was great, but I think, you know, if he really wanted to, that could have been a TKO finish. So just think about that. And nothing against Luque. Luque's a very good fighter. He's probably one of the dark horses in that division. But saying that, I mean, the fact that Woodley was taken out in the first round against a guy who's sort of mid-tier in the welterweight division is not a good sign. And again, I know all these guys are really good fighters in the welterweight division, and I know Jake Paul has not fought anyone close to Vicente Luque or Colby Covington or Gilbert Burns or Kamaru Usman, but you do wonder how much that wear and tear is going to play a role here. Again, this is not a young guy. This is a 39-year-old who's taking this fight. And granted, he has a bit of time to train for this fight, you know, with it being on August 28th, but that's sort of the big thing. But I think the biggest sort of myth here is the fact that, you know, Woodley is the same Woodley that knocked out Robbie Lawler. I just want to emphasize that because I see a lot of people making that argument like, oh, Woodley went out there and, you know, he's knocked out Lawler and he's had all these other wins, but that Woodley doesn't exist. We haven't seen that Woodley in ages. Basically, since he's lost to Usman, Woodley hasn't been the same fighter, and I think there's more than enough evidence to sort of show that Woodley is on the decline at this point. 39 years old, like I said, he's a guy that, you know, is not what he used to be. He's not like the guy we saw beat Darren Till, right? I think that Woodley is gone at this point for a variety of reasons. I mean, again, I think age and injuries sort of catch up to you as well. So to me, the wear and tear is sort of a big issue in this as well. Let's look at Woodley's knockout records. He's got 7 knockouts, 5 submissions, 7 decisions. But again, a lot of those knockouts were earlier in his career, and they just haven't been happening. And you could make the argument that it's because he's fighting tougher guys. I'll take that. But still, there wasn't even a point in any of these fights where these guys were in danger. Like even in the Luque fight, I don't remember Luque being in trouble in that first round fight. So again, this idea that Woodley is still this dangerous striker, I just don't see it. Now, of course, this is going to be a more competitive matchup than Ben Askren. Ben Askren had no striking, and he was a wrestler, and he never relied on his striking in his fights. And Jake Paul showed in that last fight, he's got some serious power. So my thing is this is anytime you've got a guy who has serious knockout power like Jake Paul does, fighting a guy who's older, it's always going to be a liability. So that's really what I'm basing this on, is the fact that Paul, a lot younger. Again, you can ignore these first 2 fights are against non-combat guys. Askren, yeah, Askren's, you know, not what he used to be, and Askren's not a striker, but still to finish Askren that early, I thought was super impressive. If he's getting a late finish on Askren and he's fighting Woodley, maybe I'm having a different opinion here, but he finished Askren in the first round. Askren's only ever been finished one other time in his MMA career early on, and that was the fight against Jorge Masvidal. The Maia fight, if you remember, he got finished later in the fight. So to me, it's like that was very impressive, and I think that's enough to sort of base Jake Paul's power, sort of look at his power and say, hey, he's got some serious dynamite in his hand, so to speak. So that's sort of what I'm looking at here as well. And again, people who say I'm out to lunch here, look at the odds right now. This is proboxingodds.com. These are a couple different books. 5 Dimes, William Hill, Bet365. Pretty much all of them have Jake Paul as the favorite. I've seen some books that have had Woodley as the favorite as well, but I think a lot of people are kind of where my line of thinking is, look, Paul's younger. Paul, you know, has power. Like all Paul has to do is land in this fight. I think with Woodley, I don't think the power exists anymore. I don't think Woodley's going to put Paul in any type of danger with his strikes. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Woodley surprises us in this fight and shows us something different, but I just don't think that Tyron Woodley that people think we're going to see on August 28th, I don't think he exists anymore. And here's the last thing I want to mention, and I talked about it off the top. Showtime took Jake Paul away from Triller. He's a huge signing for them. Like, they're not going to get him to fight someone that he's going to lose against. There's a lot invested in Jake Paul. If Woodley wins, that really does very little for Showtime. Let's get real here. He's 39 years old. He wasn't even that marketable in the UFC as champion, right? Like he wasn't one of the bigger names out there. So, you know, Showtime wants Jake Paul to win, and you look at the audience that Jake brings, you look at the money that Jake brings. I mean, the fact that this fight's even happening is because of who Jake Paul is, right? He's a huge name. He's bringing in a lot of money. Jake Paul's a smart guy. There's a reason he picked Askren. There's a reason he's picking Woodley here as well. I think he, and I even think Showtime knows that Woodley is not the same fighter he used to be, and they're going to take advantage of that. And this way, I mean, unlike Askren, they can say he beat a UFC fighter, but to say you beat a former UFC champion, that's even more clout that he's going to use and get even bigger matchups here. So I think it's very smart on Jake Paul's part for taking this fight. And I also think that Jake Paul knows what he's doing. He's got a smart team around him. This guy's not, I mean, look, say what you want about his personality, not liking him. He's got a great team around him that has prepared him well and is going to prepare him well for this fight here. So again, I'll get back on camera here a second. I'm picking Jake Paul based off all those factors. To kind of summarize here, younger guy, height and reach advantage. I think packs more of a punch at this point than Woodley does in his career, and he's got no wear and tear. Woodley has a lot of wear and tear over the last couple of fights. Again, not taking necessarily damage to the face. I know a couple of those fights, like, with Covington and Usman, those were fights that he was basically out wrestled as opposed to getting outstruck, but still, that's a lot of damage that he's taken over his career, and that's damage that Jake Paul hasn't taken. And I just, again, find me a fighter that's his age. Maybe you got like a Jan Blachowicz, but there's very few fighters that are older that tend to come back and really shine here. And I know Paul's, a much easier opponent than some of the other opponents that Woodley's fought over the last run that he's had over the last 2 years, but still, it's a boxing fight. He can't go for those takedowns. If he runs into trouble, he's got to rely on his striking. And while he does have a striking background, and we've seen that, it's still, a dangerous predicament where he's fighting a guy that has knockout power. Kind of reminds me a bit of when, Dan Henderson fought Michael Bisping, right? Dan Henderson always had a puncher's chance in that fight. He knocked out Bisping in the first fight, and then the second fight, he also knocked Bisping down again. He didn't end up winning, but you've always got that puncher's chance. I will take that puncher's chance in this fight with it being a full, boxing fight as well. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'm more than happy to debate this with you guys, but no insults. We don't need to get nasty here. Again, I'm not an expert. It's just my opinion. This is why I think Jake Paul's going to win this fight. Unless I see something crazy with some footage with Woodley sort of leading up to this, I may change my pick. But for right now, at the time of recording this, I am going to pick Jake Paul, and I'm going to stick with my guns here. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let's have a good discussion here. Let's really dig into this, and let's figure out how we think this fight's going to go. And for people, questioning my credibility or throwing out insults, the odds speak for themselves. The odds makers right now have the fight with Jake Paul as the favorite. And I know odds makers can get fights wrong, but still, that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at this fight. Okay, so I should have a video out later on Woodley as well, talking about ways that I think he can win this, but I pretty much summarized how I think Jake Paul is going to win and why I'm picking him here. So hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys soon, and thanks so much for watching.